Great. So as I've already done, a couple of introductions, just to remind for those that have just joined. Hi, I'm Liz Watchon. I'm one of our senior portfolio managers here at the National Lottery Community Fund, and delighted to talk to you about our new funding that we've just launched today. For those that hadn't heard, I'm also joined by two BSL interpreters, Leah and Lynn. So you will also see them throughout this presentation. So just to give you a quick overview of what we're going to cover today, and we'll give you a little bit more information about our strategy that we launched in last summertime, to give you a bit more context about what we're doing and also where this programme fits into that. Tell you a little bit more about the broader Climate Action Fund programme, and then we'll go into more information about the new funding that's available, and also let you know a little bit more about how to apply, and then hopefully have time to take some questions and answers. So if we can just move forward, thank you. So as I said, I'm Liz Watchon. Lovely to see you all today. Please do use the chat. I can see there's lots of things popping up already, questions and comments. So do introduce yourselves, use it to ask any questions. As I've already said, we may not get through every question, but we will send after this session an FAQ document. It is not available as of yet, but we will send that round in the next week or so for those attending today. So if we can move on, thank you. So as we said, we wanted to tell you a little bit more and give you a little bit more context about the fund's new strategy that we launched last summer, which takes us up to 2030. As part of our strategy, we're really committed to helping and supporting create resilient communities that are more inclusive and environmentally sustainable by funding activities that will strengthen society and improve lives across the UK. As part of our new strategy last year, we also launched that we are focusing on 4 community-led missions to support communities. And most importantly for this programme is that of the mission to be support communities to be environmentally sustainable. We're very aware how much climate change matters to communities, and then very keen therefore to demonstrate how much that matters to us. We know that it is increasingly recognised as the overarching issue of our time, and latest government figures that were published this March actually state that 80% of UK adults are concerned about climate change. We want to be sure that our funding is available to all communities, and is a really important part of what we look at through the environmental sustainability mission, as well as the other 3 listed on these slides, is that we will take an equity-based approach. We want to ensure that across our work, we're investing most in places, people and communities who experience poverty, disadvantage and discrimination. And the Climate Action Fund will fit very much within our environmental sustainability mission, but also will be really looking particularly at this new funding about how we support our equity-based approach going forward. If we can move to the next slide, please. Now, the Climate Action Fund is actually delivered via the UK portfolio, and we are one of 5 funding portfolios that sits within the National Lottery Community Fund. The other 4 represent the 4 countries across the UK, and we within the UK portfolio are in a unique position to support ambitions and potential of communities across the whole of the UK. Our funding is intended to complement the work of the other country portfolios, and what we tend to focus on is scaling projects that have more of a UK-wide benefit, and we're also particularly focused on projects and initiatives that can help support broader systems level change for communities across the UK. Can then move to the next slide, please. One of our flagship programmes that we've delivered through the UK portfolio has been our Climate Action Fund, which was a 10-year, 100 million fund that was actually launched in 2019. It is there and it aims to empower and inspire more people across the UK to take climate action, but also to help and encourage communities to feel that they're part of a broader movement of change, helping us move forward and how much more we can get others to get involved in climate action and understand why it's so important to them. We're also really hopeful that through all of this, we can help build and create a stronger and bigger evidence base that can help maybe influence and support policy making and help ultimately lead us all to a more resilient and equitable future. As we've just announced as part of our launch of the new funding today, the Climate Action Fund has already supported over £78 million of funding towards over 550 projects across the whole of the UK, which demonstrates how important this is to us, but also the interest and the demand that we see from communities to get more involved. This new strand of funding that we're announcing today is our 5th funding strand for the programme. As I'm sure you'll be able to see later on, the links that we can share in the chat will allow you to have a look back at our Climate Action Hub pages and see some of the things and some of the initiatives that we've funded to date. It's also important to say that as an organisation, Climate Action Fund is not the only programme that we support through for environmental and climate-based funding, and we see through many of our other responsive programmes a lot of interest and a lot of demand for this area of work. However, like I said, the Climate Action Fund has been our flagship to date. If we can move to the next slide, please. So what are we looking for with our new Climate Action Fund, Our Shared Future? We're really keen that we see ambitious projects coming through in this initiative that are linking climate action to the everyday lives and interests of local communities. We want to really see how and where we can inspire exciting change and involve more and more people, not just in the conversation, but actually leading to action. We're really keen that actually this might be new for some people, and that might mean different types of organisations that may want to come forward to this funding, or different entry points and areas of interest that might be the starting point for climate action. Across all of this initiative, we are looking to fund partnership projects, and the 2 key priority areas that we are focusing on are that of either linking climate action to the everyday lives and interests of local communities, and that could mean a range of things depending upon the area, either whether that's place or area of interest and identity that projects are working across, but also we're keen to support things that are influencing work with communities at either that regional or national level. And that could be things that are either helping to support influence policy from a community perspective, or things that are more communications campaign in nature that's helping to inspire change across the UK. But through all of what we're looking for, we're particularly interested in projects that involve people, places and communities who are experiencing poverty, discrimination and disadvantage. If we can move to the next slide, please. So just to then quickly give you an overview of what is available, and what's key to say is this funding initiative is open UK-wide. We are keen to see all types of projects within that it could either be place-based or may either be national or regional responses, or potentially actually delivering UK-wide. We don't have a particular criteria on one or the other, so it is open to any project, so long as it is able to show that there is that UK-wide importance, relevance and benefit. The total funding available for this strand is 20 million. The minimum grant size that projects can apply for is 500,000, and we expect that most grants will be in the region of 1 to 1.5 million. The length of project that we can support is between 3 to 5 years. We may also fund a small number of larger or longer projects. And for anybody that is interested in or is looking for something longer term, we'd ask that you contact us first to discuss before you apply, and we can have a further conversation with you. We'll only fund formal partnerships, and by that what we mean is partnerships that have an agreement of how they're going to work together, and more information about that is covered in our funding web pages. But what we're also looking for is partnerships that have come together around an agreed purpose and a shared vision. We really want to see how groups are coming together to deliver a longer term aim, and how they're all and why they're all invested in that particular initiative. And as I said, we'll accept applications from everything from place-based and local responses up to UK-wide partnerships. In terms of application deadline, we expect this funding to remain open until at least the end of December 2024. And please keep an eye out on our website for any information as to when we might be looking to close. And if we can move to the next slide, please. So who is it for? I've noticed already in the chat a couple of questions about the formal partnerships. So hopefully I've covered off a little bit about that. We will accept partnerships that are either new or established, but importantly, what we want to see is how they are working towards that shared vision and that collective aims. Partnership agreements are not needed before an application, but if groups are awarded funding, we would expect those partnership agreements to be signed and in place before the project starts. But it is not something that we would look at during our assessment. Just need to know that you're working towards it. What we're really keen and really interested in is how projects that may perhaps, organisations that are perhaps not a climate or environment focus group are leads in this space. We're really keen, as we've said, about how we can link to everyday activities and interests of people, and that could be a whole range of things. So keen to see, where do things like arts and culture factor into this? How could maybe supporting your local football team or hockey team or whatever it might be, that could be a really interesting way to engage people in climate action? Or where does health and well-being come into this? So we really want to see, what does that look like in terms of the different types of organisations that partnerships are working with, but also what does that mean in terms of the different sectors that organisations come from? We're really interested and want to ensure that the communities that are involved in a project are front and centre within partnerships. And so that could mean smaller groups might be involved, but also where do things like the private sector have opportunity to get involved? There are certain eligibility points around which organisations we can award funding to, and would ask people to make sure that they have reviewed that on our website before applying. For example, we can't fund private sector organisations, but we'd be really interested in how else they might be able to be involved in your partnerships. We're also really keen that partnerships make sure that they've got the right expertise on board to help them with evaluation and learning and things like communications, whether that's how to deliver press campaigns or work on your storytelling. That doesn't have to mean bringing on a new partner. It could be already that there's expertise within your organisation, but we really want to make sure that that's front and centre in your planning, and that there are the right people and the right resources available to help support your projects with that work. But what we're really keen in terms of what we're saying here is, what could an unexpected and unlikely and a different partnership look like in this space? We're really keen to see that connection, like we've said, to those everyday activities for communities, and what does that translate as into a different type of partnership? One thing that we also want to say is that if you already have a grant from the fund, including existing climate action fund projects, you can still apply and would be eligible. But what we do want to be sure is that any existing grant holders that are applying for this funding, that projects would have to go through the same route as other applicants, and that new projects would have to be distinct and different to what you have already received funding for. And if we can move to the next slide, please. So what are we unlikely to fund? Just to help you think about the sorts of things that we wouldn't accept and the sorts of costs that can't be included. We're really, really clear that this needs to be, any projects that we support need to be delivered in partnership. When I said before about our aims and ambitions in the UK portfolio to support things that are leading to systems level change, we recognise then that that involves lots of different organisations and potentially lots of different sectors to be able to help to support that. We're also really keen to make sure that nothing that we support is either top down or it does not show how that there has been that representation from the communities that they're working with. So it's really important to show who you've spoken to within your community and how you can demonstrate that it matters to them when you're applying. What we also want to be sure is what we fund actually not just helps people to engage in climate action, but it allows them to move forward into action. And it's really important that you show that within your application. We can fund some political activity and campaigning, but we can't support any political activities that promote either a particular political party, political belief, or that are targeted to influence any elections. So again, really important to consider that and what that might look like in terms of your activities and when you share that information in your application. We also won't be supporting any capital funding. So, but what we mean by that is we won't be supporting any sort of big building or refurbishment work through this funding. We can support small equipment costs that are complementary and supportive of a project, but this isn't for big capital spend. We also can't support projects that include activities that should be funded by either local or national government. And therefore, again, to be clear, particularly if groups are involving any statutory bodies or particularly local authorities, that be clear within your application about that distinction so that we know that it is distinct and different to what should be funded, like I say, either by local or national government. If we can move to the next slide, please. So in terms of timescales, you will see on our website that there is an online application form for organisations to be able to apply. There are also other routes to apply if the application form does not work for you, and would ask that you contact us to let us know, and we can provide an application form in different formats. Once you have made your initial application, it normally takes about 6 months from when you first send that to us to find out whether or not you will be receiving funding from us. At the first stage, we'll consider your initial application and we'll aim to tell you if you've got through to that next stage within about 10 weeks. Please note that as we suspect we might get a lot of interest and demand for this funding, so it could take a little longer than that, and we will make sure that we let all applicants know if it will be any longer than 10 weeks once you've applied. After that initial stage, if you're invited to submit a full proposal, you'll have around about 6 weeks to develop that and send that to us. There is guidance already on our website that explains to you the sorts of information and details that need to be included and submitted within a full proposal. So that helps also give you a sense now whether or not this funding is right for you and if you are able to submit all of that information. Once we've received that full submission from you, we will talk to you, we will share feedback and work with you as we develop our assessment of that proposal. We will then let you know our final decision around 4 months after we receive your full proposal. And if you're successful, we'll then be in touch with you about how to promote your funding, share your learning, and what it would mean in terms of getting involved in our Climate Action Fund cohort of other funded projects. If we can move to the next slide, please. One of the important points that I mentioned previously was around opportunities to share learning and evaluation of your work. One of the things that we'd encourage all interested applicants to think about when they are submitting an application is their approach to learning and evaluation. We don't expect projects to evaluate everything that they're doing, but we do expect all projects that we fund to generate evidence on the difference you are making, and so want to make sure that you're thinking about what that would include and what that would mean for you when you're developing an application. If you're awarded funding, each year we will ask for information about how groups are getting on in terms of their aims and activities. And twice a year we'll ask you to share how your project is going, including the difference that community-led action is making in your community. To give you a bit of a guide as you're developing your application, and it can depend upon the type and size of your project, we would recommend that you allocate at least 2 days per month to gathering evidence about your project, but also ensuring that you've got that time and that money to become part of the broader Climate Action Fund cohort of projects. Through the Climate Action Fund, we provide support and learning partners that will support all projects irrespective of the funding strands that they've been awarded through. These partners are there to help you think about what evidence you're generating and how you're telling the story of the project and the difference that you're making, and also help you to feel part of a broader movement and a broader network of projects. We are just about to launch the new longer term partners that we're going to be working with, and more information on that will be available in the coming months. But any projects funded through this strand of funding will become part of that. And important also that you make sure that you've planned into your budget and your timescales availability to get involved and work with others. And if you have any questions, there are some further information in the guidance for applicants that's available on our website that can help you think a little bit more about the sorts of things that you would need to do. I'm very aware that sometimes for some of the larger or more complex projects, there might be more time and or more budget that you might need to incorporate into this. You can move to the next slide, please. And then finally, a bit of a checklist to help you think about the things that you might need to do and or check before you submit an application. Make sure to look at our website to ensure that you are eligible for our funding, eligible in terms of the organisation that will be the lead, but also thinking about all of the other partners in your partnership who might be receiving funding, and make sure that they are also eligible. Also have a look at the other funding criteria and make sure that you meet that for things such as like, are you involving communities to take climate action and help to reduce those barriers for involvement, and make sure to think about smaller grassroots groups and how they could also be involved. Are you bringing together organisations across sectors and those that bring along different expertise? How will you measure your impact and share what you've learned to help others? And are you seeking to make a long-term change that continues after the project ends? There's lots of information on our web pages that we've included, not just about the sorts of costs that you can include in your application, but also the 2 priority areas that I've already mentioned and the sorts of things that we're looking to support through that. The blog that I mentioned earlier has also been shared to help groups think about not just the types of activities and give you a little bit of inspiration about the sorts of projects we're looking to support, but also the overall aims and ambitions and the difference that we're hoping to make with this funding. We really want to see how we can help support more and more people across the UK to not just become more engaged in climate action, but actually to lead them into taking action, and how that can look in terms of unusual, different and unexpected partnerships and different types of activities that we might perhaps not have seen before. So just a real shout out to make sure that you look at all of the information on our web pages before submitting an application, and make sure that you've also read the blog. Of course, there might always be questions, and as we've said before, you can get in contact with us if you have any specific questions before you submit an initial application. So if we can just move to the next slides. So I think we've already seen quite a few questions already shared within the chat. We're doing quite well for time, so hopefully we'll be able to take a fair few questions. We will make sure to finish no later than 2 o'clock, just so that we keep to time. And then if we can just go to the last slide, please. And like I said, we've got the links there. We'll pop these links into the chat if they haven't already. But obviously for anybody watching this back, they will be able to use these if they have any further questions or any further information that they need. Thank you very much. So we can probably take down the slides now, if that's okay. And if I can ask my colleagues if there are any particular questions or any areas that you would like me to highlight in terms of any questions, and then we can potentially go to a few from the floor.
Yes, so I've been keeping an eye on the chat, Liz, and I've grouped together a few of the common questions. So I've got maybe 3 or 4 of those to start us off, and then maybe we can have another look at the chat as we go. So the first one was around sort of questions about sort of match funding, whether we've got any more information on that, whether it's a requirement as part of our project. And I've also linked that with questions around kind of is there particular levels of income we'd be looking for as part of our eligibility criteria as well, in terms of kind of what organisations have got experience of managing?
Yeah, okay, great. Thank you, Zoe. In terms of the match funding question, there isn't a specific eligibility criteria about that. We are keen to see how you are getting other funding and leveraging other income, either from other partners within the partnership or other funders that you might be working with, but there is not a specific level that we require in order for you to be eligible for this. But of course, having a diverse income stream can be really helpful, and so certainly interested to see how that works. But we recognise that that will be different for different projects, and that will be something that we would potentially speak with you on a case-by-case basis. In terms of the second part of that question around income levels for organisations, again, there is not a specific income level that we are looking for or require, but be aware of the minimum amount of funding that partnerships can apply for, and think about what that means in terms of whether you're the lead or a partner within the partnership. What is the amount of money that you are getting? How much of a difference is that making to your annual income? And what are the things that you're putting in place to ensure that you and all partners can manage that appropriately? We would just want to know a little bit more about that, and perhaps how that might work across your partnership and how you are supporting others. We've been clear that we're really interested in smaller groups being able to be part of partnerships, and in our eligible costs and activities that we can support, there is that opportunity for lead organisations to consider what costs might be needed in terms of capacity to support those smaller groups to be part of a project and therefore part of a partnership. And again, if that applies to you, make sure to be clear about that in your application.
Fab, thank you, Liz. So next one, I've grouped a few together, which is around sort of building on existing work. So what's kind of, what's our approach to maybe projects where they're kind of drawing on things that they've done in the past, not necessarily continuation funding per se, but something that incorporates sort of lessons learned and kind of maybe wants to scale up or spread a good idea to go further. And I'll group that in with similar questions around applications. So can projects have multiple applications to us? Can organisations be involved in multiple partnerships that might have different applications to us? And stuff around that kind of application process.
Okay. Thanks. So it might have to come back because there's quite a few within that one. So can you just remind me in terms of the first one, just because there's quite a lot of questions in that?
Yeah, sorry, first one around kind of building on existing work, so whether that's funded previously or not, and that sort of stuff.
Yeah, great. I'll answer that one first. So yes, absolutely. I think in terms of, we're interested to see what different approaches and therefore maybe some new activity could look like. But also, if you've got proven activities from previous projects or previous work that you've delivered, then it would be great to see how that could be scaled and replicated elsewhere. And that could be on either of the priorities that we've mentioned. So whether or not that's taking an approach into a different area or working with a different community, however you are defining that community, or it could be how do you take a project that is maybe linking up more nationally and using that learning from what you've done before. What we'd want to see within your application is how and why that approach has worked before, and what are the opportunities that you've seen where you can do that scaling and replication, so that we get a good understanding of why that's the best approach and why that's the best approach for that community that you're hoping to work with.
Great. And then, sorry, my second part was around multiple kind of applications, yes, and multiple, if they're holding multiple grants, and whether they can be involved in multiple partnerships for project funding.
On that, we would say, obviously, please be aware of the limited amount of funding that we have for this. 20 million is a lot, but it's also not a lot. So we'd ask groups to think very carefully about how much they're getting involved in, bearing in mind what we're looking to achieve with this funding is funding that is across the whole of the UK. So we will be looking to have a good spread of geography in the projects that we support, but also the different types of activities. I'd also say within that, be mindful then about the capacity of organisations to be involved in lots of different applications. We'd want to be able to be sure that there was no problems with the groups being involved in different things, and would want to make sure that that's very clear in their applications as to how and why they were across multiple applications. And hopefully that answers it. It's not to say that we wouldn't look at groups being part of more than one application, but we probably would be unlikely to look at groups that were part of, multiple, getting into 6+ applications. Again, just because we want to have that good spread across the whole of the UK and a good spread of organisations and types of activities that we're supporting.
Excellent, thank you. Next one was around questions around onward granting, whether that's something we'd be considering as part of this funding.
We're unlikely to support a lot or much of this in this area. However, if there are groups that have considered this or are looking at something around this, we would ask that you contact us first before submitting an application, so that we can talk to you and better understand why that approach is right for the project, and therefore whether or not it would be something that we would be able to consider. But like I said, we are unlikely to support many looking at that sort of approach of delivery.
Thank you. There's something around an ask for sort of maybe offline or PDF versions of the applications, so that partners can kind of use this to work together on preparing answers to the questions rather than needing to go into the application screen.
Yes, absolutely. We can provide in the next week or so a PDF version of the application. You are also able to go into the online application and come back out of it again. You don't have to submit everything all in one go. So you can also have the opportunity to go through and copy and paste some of the questions and share that around if that's helpful. We will also have an easy read version of the application and also a BSL interpreted option as well. If any of those aren't suitable for you and there are any other accessibility needs, please get in touch with us and we can talk with you about what might be suitable. Because this is a UK-wide funding programme, everything is also bilingual in Welsh, and for Welsh language speakers, there is everything in Welsh available for them, the application form and also the easy read and other versions. In terms of the application process, that is open as we speak. The web pages went live this morning, including the online application form. So that is available now for anybody who is ready and wants to start an application.
Okay, thank you. Coming to the end of kind of my grouped together ones, so we might have to look back towards the chat for this, but I've got a couple more if you're happy to keep going.
Yeah,
so,
that's great.
There was a question around how we're defining community. So yeah, whether we've got any more we can kind of elaborate on that.
Great, thanks, Zoe. On that, I would say that's very much what we're looking for to understand from applicants. We are, as I said earlier, we are keen that this, as a UK-wide programme, there is opportunity for projects to look at potentially place-based communities, or maybe they're looking at a regional approach. And when I say regional, that can be defined by yourselves. We don't have a specific definition of regional. Equally, we're keen to support communities of interest or communities of identity. And again, how that can be defined by yourselves. We don't have a specific definition. We're really open to see how partnerships and projects are interpreting that themselves. What we want to see, though, is whoever you are and whatever you are defining as your community, how and why this project matters to them, how that community have been involved, and why they need or want this particular approach and why it's right for them.
Great, thanks, Liz. There was a question also around distinguishing kind of between statutory costs and sort of how we can support kind of multiple sectors working together and where that sort of additionality point might come into play.
Yeah, it's a great question, but probably quite a difficult one to answer, because some of this will depend upon either the region, area, or even country that a project is based in, as different things are covered in different ways. What we'd want to know is your explanation and your understanding of how it is distinct and different from statutory funding when you're applying. And likely for those that are invited to the next stage, that is then when we'd get into more of a detailed conversation about what that means for the project and making sure that we've checked our understanding. If there are particular questions or concerns about that, it's something that we may look at on a case-by-case basis with projects, and would suggest you get in contact with us to discuss further.
Great, thank you. This is probably my last sort of point. There's a lot of questions around sort of eligibility of different types of organisation and different types of partnership and what partnerships can include and all of that sort of stuff, which might be quite difficult to answer on a sort of case-by-case basis. Yeah. But wondering if you want to give a line to kind of answer those in general.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. So in terms of eligibility of organisations, there is a clear list on our website of the organisations that we can and can't support through our funding. For this programme, because we're looking to support partnerships, any partner that is going to receive any funding from the project that you're applying for funding for would have to be an eligible organisation. But if they are not receiving any funding, so for example, when I mentioned involvement of the private sector, we'd be really interested in seeing how they could form part of your partnership, but they would not be eligible to receive any funding through the project. I appreciate that there may be other examples, as Zoe said, in terms of the detail of different types of partnerships and organisations that you're working with. Again, I would suggest making sure that you read over what we've included on the website as to who we can and can't support with our funding in terms of organisational eligibility. If there's anything that you are not sure about, please get in contact with our advice team. They can give you a lot more information and talk you through that eligibility point. But the key message here is for partnerships, any partner that is receiving funding has to be an eligible organisation.
Thank you. That's all my sort of preloaded questions now, so happy to kind of revert to what might be coming in on the chat. If anyone's got any last burning questions that they want to throw to Liz.
I was going to say, yeah, thanks. We can take some of the questions in the chat, or if anyone has anything that we haven't answered, feel free to raise your hand. One thing I would say is that we won't get into discussions around very specific project information here. If there are any questions around that, I would suggest contacting us via our email address that's been shared, but we can obviously look at more broader programme and eligibility questions in this session. I haven't got the chat in front of me, but if there are any, if anybody wants to flag any to me.
Yep, a few more have come in, so I can read those out to you, Liz, if you haven't got the chat. There's one around, is climate action both reducing emissions and increasing resilience to climate impacts? So I think that's a mitigation and adaptation based question.
Yeah, and that's a great question. We're really interested in both sides. As I said when I was explaining a bit more about our new strategy across the National Community Fund, a key element of that is about how do we support resilient communities. So we're really interested to see whether that is mitigation or adaptation, and we we're not looking for one or the other. Again, we want to see how that's being interpreted by you in terms of your applications and what the communities that you're working with want, what's most relevant to them and what is most needed. But happy and we're open to look at both.
Great. There's a question around distribution of funding among partners. If there's a lead applicant, for example, and 2 other partners, I think it maybe comes into our sort of equitable funding kind of approach.
Yeah, that's great. I can answer that. Yeah. So, I mean, we'd be keen for those working in partnerships to see that there is a good distribution of that funding across all partners. Now, it still may be the case that some might receive more than others, depending upon their levels of involvement or whether or not they're taking on more of a project management role. We'd expect to see that explained in your application as to what that looks like. Importantly, as I said earlier, we're really keen that we see smaller groups being part of these partnerships, and leads can apply for capacity costs to support those organisations to get more involved and hopefully help reduce any barriers to their involvement. What we'd also say is that distribution of funding should be appropriate and proportionate to the size of the organisation as well. So making sure that they are able to manage the amounts that they are being allocated and that they've got the governance in place to be able to support them to do so. Appreciate it's not a one answer or another. So I think, again, if people have got questions, it's something that we can pick up in conversation. And it's also something that we would get into more detail in with applicants if they were invited through to the full proposal stage.
Fab. There's a question in there about kind of what do we have in mind by climate action? Do we mean kind of making life changes, or do we mean becoming campaigners? Is there any more information we can give about that?
I think, again, some of this is more going to be how is it interpreted by the community that you're working with. I think one of the key things that we want here is that whilst we're looking very much to sort of engage more people in climate and in the idea of then taking more action, what that action then ends up meaning could be very different for different communities and for different people. Obviously, whatever we fund has to be within the bounds of what we are able to support. So using that sort of example of campaigners and activists, you know, we have to be, whilst we can fund some political activity, we can't fund things that obviously are supporting or, you know, involved with a particular political party or belief. So it's just to be aware of those sorts of things. But we are quite open to see what is the interpretation of applicants. There is a little bit more information on the website about that as well. So again, would encourage people to have a look at that. And I think the other thing that I would say on that is that we don't necessarily expect that climate will always be the immediate or natural entry point for projects and perhaps the project activities. For example, if a group is focusing on sport or arts and culture, that might be more the driver in terms of how you're engaging with people and recognizing what people are interested in and what matters to them, with the climate message and the climate action and whatever you're doing in that space being something that comes afterwards, but the hook being the actual interest that the communities have.
We've got something in around whether the fund can sort of facilitate brokering, I suppose, of kind of potential partners together and kind of bring you know, potential applicants together to connect and form connections, relationships, and maybe look ahead at working together, and whether we've got any capacity to do that.
And what I would say is, obviously, if groups are interested, please do feel free to share your details in the chat in this session if you think there's opportunity to make connections. We're unlikely to have capacity to put on local sessions to do that effectively, sort of matchmaking, but we will be working with our colleagues across different regional and country teams to think about how we might be able to get the message out there and encourage across different networks. But would certainly say, you know, use this channel as an opportunity to connect in with one another. We are unable, obviously, to share details details ourselves, because obviously quite understandably of GDPR requirements. So we'd encourage you to use that today. And like I said, we'll be working with other networks to try to hopefully help stimulate and support other groups to make those connections.
Conscious of time, so we've probably got a bit of time for a few more.
Yeah.
Do you anticipate any change to the fund's direction or emphasis in relation to the general election this year?
I'm not quite sure if you meant in terms of this particular programme or more broadly. I would say this funding programme is set up, and its criteria is not going to change. It has been designed over a number of months, and as we said, will be open until we suspect around about end of December time. But it is not intended that it would change its focus based on any sort of external factors such as that.
Fab. There's also questions around, is there a risk that the fund will sort of run out before it closes or close early, or the 20 million, you know, if it runs out, and what, you know, is there a risk that would be inundated by applications that meet the criteria, and that will mean that we kind of have to close earlier than we anticipate?
It's a very good question. And one that we will be keeping a close eye on to see what happens in terms of how quickly we start to get applications, and whether those applications are a fit with the criteria and the aims and ambitions that we're hoping to achieve with this funding. We know that there is always more demand than often there is funding available, and that's not just a unique position for the Climate Action Fund. But it is something that we'll keep a constant eye on, and if anything changes, or if there is any change to the funding available, we would make sure that people were aware of that in plenty of time. What we're not doing is looking at a first come, first serve basis with this programme. We are looking to ensure that the funding is spread out over time, so that it gives people opportunity, if they need extra time to apply, that they're not at a disadvantage by waiting a few months before they put in an application form. But it is something that we know that we'll be keeping a constant eye and a review on, and if there were any changes, that would be made and publicly available.
Great. I'm just looking through. There's a lot of people now introducing themselves,
which is great.
I'm just trying to scroll through those and pick out the questions. It's probably worth reiterating that yes, we will be sharing the slides, and we'll be kind of looking at the questions and incorporating quite a few of these into our frequently asked questions document that will be circulating as well. So just to reiterate that in case anyone kind of has missed that bit. Are we looking for good geographical coverage and size of organisations and partnerships? So did we have anything in mind in terms of that sort of scale?
In terms of what we fund through the whole of this funding strand, then yes, we will be looking to make sure that we've got a good mix of different geographies and different types of approaches, different types of activities and different focus areas. But there is not a particular eligibility criterion related to geographical size. As I said, we are looking for things that might be quite local and place-based, all the way through to things that could be UK-wide. And we are not looking for an X amount of applications or funding that we're going to distribute to one or the other. We will look at a good mix, but it's not something that anyone should feel concerned about, that we're only going to do so much of one type or another. But again, go back to what we just want to see is the rationale for why the geography or the community or the size within your application.
Great. And then I'm guessing maybe the questions are dying down a little bit now.
Yeah, so probably one more then.
One more. There's one around, could the funding be used to scale up something that they're already doing, so spreading that further into a region?
Yes, absolutely. Really interested to see where existing things could be scaled and or potentially even replicated in other areas. That has always been something that we're really interested in through the Climate Action Fund, in our ambitions to hopefully help more people not just get engaged, but also more communities think about what does action look like for them, and how can good work of others that's already been going on help inspire and support people to think about their own activities, but also where groups are able to then take that learning and scale and replicate elsewhere, then yes, absolutely interested to see what that could look like.
Fab. That's all the questions.
Great. Well, thank you so much, everybody. I note that lots of people have been making connections and sharing their details in the chat, which is lovely to see. And it's great to see the diversity of groups that are with us today. Thank you for your questions and thank you for your time. As my colleagues have said, we will, with all of the attendees that registered today, we will be sharing an FAQ document with you in the coming week. Once we've had a chance to sort of compile everything together, we'll also be able to share with you a copy of the slides for your reference, and then that will include the details around how to get in contact with us, and also a reminder of the links to the information that's available on our web pages. But thank you so much again. Look forward to seeing applications, no doubt, from many of you, and wish you a lovely rest of afternoon. Thank you.